and safety. Our people truly are the bravest and most incredible people.
I have a lot of friends in the young.
And they know and we know that our hearts are with them every second of every minute of every day. Am Yisrael. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jimmy Ben-Haim, and it's an incredibly remarkable coincidence because I have absolutely no relation to tonight's guest, my brother Mike Ben-Haim, completely unrelated. The author as well. Welcome to Federation CJA West Island, first ever evening of comedic book reading. I truly have no idea whatsoever if it is actually the first ever, but it seemed like the right thing to say because no one in this room can prove it otherwise, except for me. Welcome to the first one ever. As a member of the Federation CJA West Island team, it's truly a pleasure to welcome you to our community space here and create meaningful experiences. Our vision is to foster an engaged and vibrant Jewish community here on the West Island, one that embraces a culture of philanthropy and strong connections to both the greater Montreal Jewish community, Israel, and the diaspora. Now, especially more than ever. Now to be less serious. Mike Ben-Haim, my brother, has been an exceptional mentor and teacher for me all my life. Okay? He taught me some very important things, such as how to duck when someone swings for your head at full speed. Amazing moves. How to drive a manual, stick shift while getting your arms beaten every time you make a mistake. So imagine, it's hard enough to already drive a stick shift, but getting punches as you're doing it, truly I have exceptional talent thanks to that. And how a little brother will always be a little brother, no matter of size, age, or other accomplishments and factors in life. So really this time, jokes aside, he taught me laughter, he taught me strength, he taught me endurance and survival. He taught me the depth of the vast world of music. And I know there's a good friend of mine here, Vic. It's something that we can never put aside, the value of the music that he basically put into us and gave us and the knowledge and education of it. Taught me how to speak in front of a crowd. And most of all, he taught me the true meaning of loyalty and perseverance in the face of any obstacle or challenge. Mike is a consummate professional in the art of entertainment and in his love and commitment to his community. From his early days in Chamonix to his many years at Talmud Torah, Herzliya to Camp Brith, and his undying relationships with every person who has crossed his path to his years in Toronto's Jewish community now, without further ado, it is my honor to introduce to you a man known as the OG of ADHD. That is him, a man that really needs no introduction because in any case he won't stop talking until you know exactly who he is. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mike Ben-Haim.
Just like I wrote it. Thank you. All right, well, I'm just here to read. But there were a few things I had to say first. I have to thank Wendy and Mara. Thank you so much. Our co-chairs. Really old friends from Chamonix that we've been so close that I haven't seen either of them for 30 years. Only on Facebook and social media, but they came through. Bless you. Sandy Jeskin. Thank you, baby. Sandy came through, sponsored this event on his own. Nobody has his own money, sold his hair to get this done today. And Sandy and I went to high school together along with these ladies here, and Lizzie and I actually love the guys, class of 19. And I just want to remind you, because everybody else doesn't know this, that you're the reason that my glasses broke in Israel in 1983, and I had to go a month with waking up every morning with going, how many fingers?
It's the fucking thing.
Thank you very much. Our other sponsor, Vic. Bless you. You know what I love about Vic? For the fact that he made money, that's good. But it always reminds me that when these guys were kids, him and my brother, I used to try to get them into music. And it's a thankless job, right? But not this guy. This guy listens to everything and became a huge music lover and reminds me of it every time. And God bless you for that, because that's the greatest thanks I could get forever. Thank you all for your support sincerely. The feedback that I've gotten is wonderful. People come up to me and say amazing things. Like somebody said, hey, you wrote a book, don't you have to be smart to do that? I was like, nope. Apparently you don't. This community has been very good to me. I'm so glad I grew up here. I live in Toronto now as part of a community that our family basically built the first Sephardic synagogue in Toronto. And here you guys know me as Mike. There, when I go to the synagogue, they only call me exclusively by my Hebrew name, which is Shh. So you would know that's those guys, and I love them. Because of the situation in Israel, I don't want to bring everybody down. We all know what we're going through and what we've seen more and more the last few years, and it's been rough on our people. And I think that we should just remember to be thankful, and I am every morning, for the fact that if anything else, this has unified us. So I'm very thankful for that, and that I'm thankful for the fact that we're I'm thankful for the fact that we're all rich. It's really a great, I didn't know it, but some Gentile at work told me, and I never argued because I really wanted it to be true. But since I'm here at CJA, I might as well ask, who do I talk to about getting my Jew check? And how does it work? Is it in like monthly stipend, or is it like a lump sum because I'm on back day, whoever that is? So I start with the book. The story of any good Jewish boy requires an understanding of how the essence of their identity is formed from the very beginning. The first event that we attend is the one held in our honor, the bris, where our first and possibly most significant physical alteration is performed. Some say we make it smaller. We didn't. It's, in this story, our boy, me, is not a first one. My parents' first attempt at reproduction produced a girl, which is the Sephardic version of better lookiness. Luckily, almost exactly 1 year later, the good Lord looked favorably upon them and granted them a marvelous boy child. At 8 days old, ushered into a room full of strangers who would eventually be known as family and friends, the child is placed on the lap of some honored family member or friend. In my case, I think it was my grandfather, although my recollection can't be trusted. Perhaps because I was distracted by the dude already fiddling with my bottom half. One might notice that if you look closely, the freshly spawned suckling instinctively reacts no differently than a fully developed male, with the possible exception of an impassioned plea for anesthesia. Alas, the sons of Abraham, guided by the infinite wisdom of the Torah, decreed that drugs were not a necessity. We, the crossers of Canaan, keepers of the commandments and makers of matzah, are soothed only by the hand of the High One, blessed be. That alone ushers us through the pain and suffering. That and a miraculous elixir known as manischewitz. Some believe that it is just kind of like an entry-level form of wine, but we of Yiddish persuasion know its true power, not the least of which is to act as an effective form of sedation. So the mohel, or the moil, as some of you know, is the designated sniffer. The guest of honor is given a manischewitz Moses cloth on which to suckle, create a feeling of heightened relaxation, and curiosity is born. As he is overwhelmed with sights and sounds, there is some mild protest as his loincloth is lifted and a breeze passes through the soldiers of Zion. As Dr. Chapi proceeds, an additional infusion of the sacred serum turns resistance into scarce protest until the scalpel is held, along with the congregation's collective breath, and this barely conscious dilettante sobers up all too suddenly. It begins with a moan tinged with understandable misgiving, as if punctuated with a question mark. Like if words were available, the child might say, excuse me, what's that for? And then when Captain Carvey clamps the excess skin, it triggers a more desperate protest, like, okay, mister, whatever you're doing, let's all just take a moment. And as the ritual concludes, a swift motion unleashes a primal scream, cloaked in disbelief, that pushes the limits of his virgin lungs for 5 to 10 straight seconds before he just passes out. Would it be better if I did the impression for you? Just let me drink the child. And then we all rejoice. And we feast. Everyone except him. Thus every Jewish boy begins his life, initiated in a ritual that bonds us to the Lord and provides each child with his very first lesson, that at any moment we can be lulled into a false sense of security, exposed, emasculated before an unsympathetic public. Why? Because we are chosen! We are special. We are the chosen ones. Amen. Let me move into the future. My sister and I were the first among our extended family born of a mixed marriage. My mother was Ashkenazi, my father was Sephardic. There are many differences, but for the goyim, I like to say that if you owe money to an Ashkenazi, they're sending a Sephardic. My mother Sheila was born in Poland to Holocaust survivors. When the war was over, my grandparents, who would become known to me as Willie and Sadie, returned to an absence of almost all family and community. It was difficult to rejoice, but they met each other. And my grandmother instinctively knew she had found someone she could potentially nag for the rest of her life. It's those little things, you know? So they started over. And they schlepped my mom and Uncle Moishe onto a cattle boat to Israel, where they lived for 3 years before qualifying for another one of those emigrant liners to the magical land of hopes and dreams, America. It's unclear at what point they realized that Canada was not in fact a part of the United States, but by then they had landed in Montreal. My father Marcos was born in Tangiers, Morocco. Dad was a proud Tangerine, and yes, that's the thing. You know those little oranges with the mallet sticker? Yeah, those are clementines. I have no idea. That's really another great marketing opportunity, Miss Frankie. The seventh of 9 siblings, Dad grew up speaking Spanish at home, attending school in French, and picking up assortment of Arabic phrases and slurs along the way. The Tatarino, okay? And in fact, most Moroccan Jews were not particularly creative when it came to naming their offspring. They all pulled out the same handful of biblical names, right? Thus, everyone, perhaps out of necessity, acquired one of several derivative names. For example, Jacob could be Jacob, could be Jack, or Jacques, but it could also be Jaco, using the Spanish J, or Jacoito, using the diminutive, or any other derivative, including Gobi, Gogo, Gogo, Gogi, Jaco, Jacobo, Gogo. Right? Joseph could be Joseph, with a soft French J, very sexy. Or Yosef, or Joe, or Jojo, Jose, Joselito, Yusuf, Yosef. Solomon, Salomon, could be Sori, Salomi, Salomito, Momi, or Momo. Most of these don't even make sense, frankly. And in most cases, don't actually shorten the name at all. In fact, somewhere in this room we probably have a Bilou, Kiki, Eti, Titi, and my favorite Bébert. Is there a Bébert? I love Bébert because Albert, despite having the same number of syllables, is apparently easier to just compliments. All of my aunts were addressed as Tita plus their name, right? And my uncles were similarly called Tito. So if you had an uncle actually named Tito, which I think we just established is a possibility, right? Just Tito Tito. I'm just saying. What is the point of this information? None really. Other than to demonstrate that no matter where you come mentioned, my bachelor dad landed in Montreal, and at some point crossed paths with my mom, who was 10 years younger. She was immediately captivated by his suave Latino style, you know, which defied everything she knew about Jewish men. The ultimate catch. A Jew without that Jew. In those days, you know, a few dates to meet the parents. Within a year and a half, they're married with one kid. Dad was 30, mom was 20, kid was 60. The following year, a handsome young male child was born. Keep your eye on it. Before I even knew who I was, Dad landed a job that took us to Toronto. I was about 2 years old, I guess. My father's parents lived nearby, along with 5 of his siblings, each having about 3.4 children and counting. I thought the whole world consisted of just me, my cousins, and their cousins. Everyone I knew was Sephardi in Toronto. Now, I was born just shy of my sister's first birthday, which means that for 4 days, we were the same age. In my mind, that made us twins. You know how twins are said to have that unbreakable bond of shared consciousness, finishing each other's thoughts, forming alliances against common enemies, different kind of twins. Not us at all. We loved each other in silence. Minus the silence. My father was the penultimate household authority. My mother just couldn't wait to be with him. There's the flower girl at my parents' wedding. And she couldn't wait to be with him. We were just the kids. She had to babysit in between. Dad had strict old school rules, and my mother had a few weird ones based on her mood. You know, like, okay, new rule, no more questions. Parenting was kind of a fluid discipline back then. One area where both my parents failed me miserably was in fostering creativity. My father in particular had some very interesting notions about music, theater, and art as if they existed solely for the mild amusement of little girls. But I was a boy. We covered this on there, but I'm going back to the music. One of my earliest memories was about 5 years old in Toronto. A music teacher arrived at our house with a guitar, an accordion, and a keyboard, and until that moment, I don't think I'd ever watched anything more intently that wasn't a cartoon. I listened with fascination while my sister was in another room watching TV. I asked the man questions and stated rather clearly, for a 5-year-old, that while I would happily learn piano eventually, I felt it best to start with guitar, and this man seemed pleased with my interest until my father said, "Why, it's enough for you for your sister." Ouch. If ever mere words could cripple a young soul, that simple phrase was inscribed. I was offended and ashamed before this stranger, who perhaps out of pity or to drum up more business said, "Why not both?" Like swatting a bee, that merely precipitated the sting as he was promptly dismissed. "Please ignore him, this is for the girl." I can still recall holding back tears, expecting the man to come to my defense by responding with, "What girl? The one whose absence might infer that she couldn't care less?" Instead, he just nodded and muttered something like, "Kids, huh? What are you gonna do?" My sister began piano lessons, and my father even ended up buying a used saloon-style upright piano. I remember wanting to say, "Ha! I'll bet a guitar would have been cheaper." But I didn't. I didn't say it, and it wouldn't have helped. My sister learned the basics, but it didn't stick nearly as long as my memory of the first of many times I wished I had stood up for myself more staunchly. Shortly thereafter, we went back to Montreal. Suddenly we had to schlep a piano that no one was using. Montreal was colder in every way. But man, am I glad I grew up here in two of the greatest decades in this country's history. I ain't kidding. To recap, my parents had my sister within their first year of marriage, and I came along less than a year after, and then nothing. So either they had always planned on only having 2 kids. Whereas I see it, after having me, they were like crunched over with their hands to me exhaustion, waving everyone past them and said, you guys go ahead, time out. You guys go ahead, we're gonna catch up, we'll catch up. Just give us like a decade. We just need a decade. We're tired. Well, just before my 12th birthday, the announcement was made. My mother was ready to be a parent. It's okay. To this new child, it was my chance to be a big brother and use all of the wisdom I had acquired in my first 12 years to shield this child from the harsh realities of life. You've met it, didn't work. And guide them through its hills and valleys. Then my dad announced that the baby would need one of our bedrooms, and I'm like, oh great, Mike, there we go. Mikey's gonna be sleeping on the couch. Then Dad announced that he would build a bedroom and a bathroom in the basement with a door that already led to the garage, essentially a separate apartment. Oh, I don't think I ever coveted anything that much in my short life. But every experience to this point had taught me that if there was a golden ticket, my sister Lisa was gonna get it. It's just, I may as well just give up. But I wanted this. I briefly considered murder. But the scenarios kept playing out poorly, where I'd feel guilty or the bad guy, you know what I'm saying? And, I could always see my parents wagging their fingers. We don't condone murdering our sisters. You were grounded doing something like that. Just then my dad laid out the terms of the proposition. If it's a girl, Lisa gets the roof. If it's a boy, Mikey gets it. What? A 50-50 chance! Woo! Those were the best odds I was ever going to see. I prayed. I visualized. I manifested. And for once, the good Lord smiled down on me on July 21st. One day before her own birthday, my mother and I both received a gift. She got the child that would ultimately become her favorite son. And I got my own pad. And just in time for puberty. Whatever that means. Didn't mean much. They named the boy Jimmy, which came from the Spanish name Jaime, and in Hebrew would be Chaim. Perfectly acceptable name. But I felt the need to point out that our last name was Ben Chaim. Everyone in the room seemed unmoved. Tough crowd. I repeated. The kid's name is going to be Chaim Ben Chaim. Chaim Ben Chaim. I was out there. Now, as an older brother, I have the responsibility of, as you heard, shaping Jimmy's sense of humor. I thought that was my job. I did so as every older brother's done for centuries, through jokes and pranks at his expense. I thought that was the deal. Once again, however, I had misread the household hierarchy and quickly learned that seniority was apparently not a factor in this family's infrastructure. Instead, my baby bro learned from a very young age that anytime he whined, my mother, who incidentally now spoke Spanish, would scream, Mikey, déjale! The tables had turned so quickly and suddenly that I was now the one whining, I didn't do nothing, right? In fact, the following summer, that phrase, Mikey, leave him alone, was apparently shouted on multiple occasions while I was at camp for a month. No kidding. Jimmy had one wrapped around his finger, clearly. But Dad was not so easily manipulated. Still, Jimmy had grown cocky, like the mythological Icarus. He would reach higher and higher until one day he would fly dangerously close to the sun. To tell this story, I'm going to need to fast forward to 1984, Christmas time. Family trip to Florida. Unprecedented quality time between Jimmy and the parents. I was 17, so I was hanging out with my friends at the prototypical party time hotel on the Fort Lauderdale Strip. You know the kind of place with an unjustifiably luxurious name like the Riviera, the Regency, or the Majestic, while being entirely devoid of any such implied optimism. No amount of resplendent branding could mask that reality, you know? A cheaply furnished, musty-smelling room with filthy carpeting, 2 beds, and a couch, all invisibly sheathed in the cumulative remnants of its predecessors. Add a cot that smells like a homeless person's socks, and you had economical lodging for 5 or 6 indifferent teenage boys whose primary objective was to get some, while spending less than $20 a day. By day 4, I was insolvent, unceremonious. So when my father, who had been rambling around Florida in his rented Oldsmobile with plush velvet interior, popped into the Chateau d'Elegance to see if I might fancy going to lunch, I of course left at the opportunity. I sensed a palpable tension. These 3 had been together too long, around the clock, and Jimmy had perhaps been pushing his as yet unrefined puissance. Within the first few minutes, Jimmy grumbled something and came to a screeching halt. My dad turned around, and I could swear I saw smoke as he issued a warning as earnest and as austere as had ever been seen before or since. To put this into context, my father originally viewed the use of corporal punishment as a serviceable parenting scheme, which if used strategically a handful of times, need only ever be threatened thereafter. That worked for me. But that had evolved over time, softened really. And this had scarcely given Jimmy a peek behind the curtain of consequences, and that decisive ultimatum that ended with the words, or else. As a result, our reactions were markedly dissimilar. And I was like, damn, do you ever want to taste so I could find out what went on here? What did I miss? Now, I learned long ago to recognize the moment my father's patience expired. You could usually feel the temperature shift, and in this moment, Jimmy was headed toward an expert. Dad exhaled sharply through his nose, never been silent, and in the most terrifyingly calm voice, delivered the final message. If I hear one more word, una palabra, and just the message was clear. To me, anyway, my emotions seesawed between hoping Jimmy gets the message and desperately curious to see. Minutes later, we entered the Galleria Mall, my mind locked on food, while my mother nonchalantly embarked on some critical doily shopping list. I'm not kidding. My mother was never one to acknowledge the gravity of the situation. Rather than diffuse tension, she had a tendency to stoke it with an almost supernatural indifference. If there was a spark in the air, my mother reached into her purse. It wasn't to go out and extinguish it. Instead, what would emerge was a giant pair of bellows, which she would calmly squeeze a few times, maybe even spray some lighter fluid before placidly turning away, leaving an inferno behind her, like something out of a John Wick movie, without so much as a glance back. Now, Jimmy and I were both hungry, but I knew that even mentioning it would make my mother take long, so I said nothing. But Jimmy still wanted to have power. You know? Mom, undeterred from her quest for the world's most unnecessary item, ignored him in her own unique way. She gave the slightest tilt of her head to indicate that she could hear him, but refused to acknowledge him with any actual eye contact. Now, in the world of competitive antagonism, this was Mom's signature move, and she executed it masterfully. And then it hit me. I knew this move. I had lived this move. In fact, I had reason to believe this move was invented for me. Mom's equivalent of a killer serve. It was maddening, and 9 out of 10 times it worked on me, but I had spent years in this arena and had developed calluses on my psyche. But Jimmy, he was unprepared. A lamb to the slaughter. Suddenly I realized he had no defense whatsoever, because he had never needed it. He had never confronted such an adversary. Sure, He knew her, but only as a teammate in a pickup game at the park. He never faced her in a sudden death matchup. He wasn't ready to go toe-to-toe with the heavyweight champ. I felt this little bit of sympathy, frankly. And my head swirled between Mom and Jimmy as I noticed him teetering on the precipice of a mega tantrum. I tried calling out, but it was like one of those old Walkmans with weak batteries. It's too late. The foot stomping began, the wailing escalated. My dad swooped in like a mother hawk protecting his nest and scooped Jimmy up under his right arm like a rolled up rug. A loud, kicking, screaming rug. This was a critical error on Jimmy's part. He had caused a public spectacle. Now, Dad had no choice but to follow through in a way that reestablished authority over his domain. As parenting 101. The problem was Pops was genuinely furious, adding fuel to the fire. As Dad sleepwalked through sacks, gripping the writhing child like a bag of stolen merchandise, Jimmy made his last desperate move. He screamed, "Help! He's not my father! He's not my father!" Oh, I leapt into action, right? I began jogging side saddle behind him, assuring people that he was, in fact, his father, right? Luckily, this was Florida, where many of these people had children who had run amok. And people were like saying, "I know what I'd do if this was my child. Go on and show him you gave life, you can take it away. Hallelujah." I followed them to the parking lot where Dad impressively managed to open the door with one hand and throw Jimmy in with the other. Before positioning himself like an Olympic swimmer about to lunge into the race, with arms already in paddle mode, you know what I'm saying? Just then I daringly grabbed the back of my dad's shirt just to give him pause for a moment and spare him the emotional trauma that would have followed. Inadvertently, this allowed the fundamental point to come across, which was for Jimmy to see that he meant what he said, and that in a war, there are no winners, only casualties. After a few seconds, with a precarious mistension lingering in the air, we three drew a collective breath. My father looked at Jimmy as if to say, "Oh, you don't know how fellas, you can't," and he's going, you know? Jimmy would finally break the silence in a surrendering tone that only he could get away with. "All right, already, I get it. Can we eat now?" My father nodded, and we all three walked back together in silence. We almost walked right past my mother, who was still shopping for toys. And spoiler, she didn't buy it. Okay? If I may run ahead, the summer of 1984 marked another stage of development. I had been dating a girl a year ahead of me in high school, principally. Went to graduation with her and had planned to work with her at a day camp. But me and my friend Jeff were fired during pre-camp for being teenage boys. That's not how they put it, but that's what it is. A couple of days later, Jeff, my friend, informed me that Camp in Ingrid was hiring last-minute staff. And I have to lie about my age to qualify as a junior counselor. The pay was nothing, but it was a free ride for the summer. And all I had to do was babysit a bunch of 11-year-old boys. How hard could that be? We hopped in a van, we got to camp at sundown, and there were a couple of vaguely familiar faces. One guy named Stuart had just graduated with my girlfriend, whose age I was supposed to be. I had been here 30 seconds, busted. That lie had the shortest lifespan of any I've ever told, and I have told so. To Stuart's credit, he never mentioned it. The funny part was that he had gone to Herzliya together for 4 years. Gone to the same grad just a couple of weeks earlier, and had barely ever spoken. I think we both thought each other was weird, and we were both probably right. But once confined within the same 50 square meters for a summer, it didn't take long for us to bond. We laughed a lot, shared intimate details of our lives, sometimes a little too intimate, depending on the Stuart, big oversharer. When it came to girls, I'd have to go, that's all I want to hear. You can stop right there. Another familiar acquaintance was this weird guy named Alan. I had seen him at parties, flailing around on the dance floor like a lunatic, except a bit like me, not entirely without grace. He's always clowning, hitting on girls with absurd and hilarious propositions, and yet there was something undeniably real about him. He out-Sephardic me, and everybody else I knew, that's for sure. His English was crude, yet he maintained the ability to use it quite creatively. He also spoke French and Hebrew, and carried himself with a kind of unfiltered, if sometimes, shall we say, inadvisable honesty. He and Stuart couldn't have been more different on the surface, but both seemed bound by an unspoken understanding of what it meant to be unapologetically themselves. This was not the life I had been living at all. I never showed it, but I felt ashamed. How was it that these guys never had to put on airs? They just were, in a way that I only ever with around my family. My cousins knew who I was, so there was no pretending. But everyone else, with everyone else, I was just another version of myself built for the audience at hand. Not tonight, though. Years later, Stuart would pivot from men's school to stand-up comedy, which thrilled his parents. I would eventually throw my hat in the ring half-heartedly with an air of indifference to mask the fear of failure. I complimented him on his fearlessness and dedication, and he told me something I desperately needed to hear. He said, "You've got stage presence, and you may even be funnier than me, but you don't know why, and you're not doing anything to find out why." How dare you? He continued, "The stuff that randomly comes out of your mouth may be funnier than most comedians I know, but we get up on stage every night. We face it, we bomb, we do it again until we bomb a little less, and then figure out when, why, or if we're funny at all." But those firm and wise words served me greatly after that, and Stuart Silver, if any of you know him, remained a beloved friend until his sudden and premature death 30 years later. Now, back at camp, there was a complex hierarchy. You had CITs, SCs, JCs, SCs, Section S, and at the top of the pyramid was an actual adult. It so happened that my adult supervisor for junior side happened to be Frank. Frank was one of my teachers at Herzliya. I busted again! Not even 24 hours! Surprisingly, he never sold me out. He did, however, pop by for a chat now and then, usually after catching me in some inappropriate activity. First of all, Frank, I should tell you, had a gift for talking to kids like young adults rather than children. Case in point, we called him Frank. He maintained authority but rarely chastised. The first time he caught me in a compromising position, outdoors with a young lady in the woods or something, I don't know what happened. He feigned ignorance and told us just to move along. The second time, when a different girl, he asked her politely to return to her section and then pulled me aside. I was looking like, not that I don't know what boys and girls do, but I caught you once, and I swear to you I wasn't trying. Would you please try harder to seek out a more private setting? Thank you. And as he walked away, he went, "And don't smoke!" I don't know why he felt he had to throw that in. One weekend I felt like being a counselor came naturally. And by natural, I mean I was just another one of the kids. But I had enough authority to tell the other kids, "Shut up!" Alan, too, was basically an overgrown child, but more overgrown. Alan was a whole different kind of counselor, unbothered by insolence or insults. He gave as good as he got. It was both amusing and oddly impressive. Alan had a talent for dispensing jibes and unfavorable nicknames and even insults without incurring a backlash. I think it was because of his infectious enthusiasm. I'll give you an example. Before knowing everybody's names, he'd be like, "Okay, let's line up Gingy, Lazy Eye, Schnur, Polaco, guy who still hasn't showered since he got out the bus, and kid who doesn't know he's gay yet. Who's ready for swimming Hey! Woo! He was nuts, but genuine, and somehow the kids understood that instinctively. We were just like one night after the kids were asleep, the camp hosted a coffee house for the staff, talent show basically. Some guy gets up, he's beautiful. He's playing his guitar, sultans of swing. It was all going so well, until he decided to follow it with his own original touching ballad about his beloved father dying on the night of his graduation. Good night, folks. Everybody's like, okay, I'm up. That's it. This guy just put a damper on the whole room. The event organizers huddled in a panic, desperately thinking of someone who could juggle, perform magic, puppetry, ventriloquism, anything to lighten the mood. They approached me. Hey, we hear you do a really good Eddie Murphy. See, at the time, I had memorized Eddie Murphy's Delirious and constantly used excerpts in daily conversation. But never one to refuse a mic, I hopped on stage. This was the moment that made me fall in love with stand-up comedy. Wasn't even my material. But people were laughing. So much so that after I finished one routine, they asked for more, and I delivered. Then I took a bow. No one else performed that night. True? So the next morning I was basking in the post-show high. Suddenly one of the counselors greeting me on the way to the flagpole. Hey, Mike! Counselors I'd never seen before. Hey, Mike! Or maybe mimicking Eddie Murphy's high-pitched, how you doing? Overnight, 100 people I'd never spoken to suddenly knew my name, and not in a bad way, for once. So that allowed me to cultivate new relationships, some that would have a meaningful impact on my future. Just as I was entering CJA. This brave new world opened its doors to me invitingly, and I did very well. And yet somewhere in the background there was a faint discord. A gentle alarm buzzing in the back of my mind that I kept taking snooze on, but knowing I'd eventually have to wake up. I had breezed through my first semester, after which I would be off to Florida with friends where I would celebrate my 18th birthday. Happy times. And only in the silence of solitude did I ever briefly question why that alarm kept sounding. Even my father seemed positive, seeing me somewhat regulated for once. On the eve of December 18th, 1985, I had written a paper that just needed to be typed per professor's instructions, and I was prepared for my last exam that following day, and I was out. My father, wanting to spare everyone the torture of listening to me painstakingly slam on the typewriter with 2 fingers, offered to type it for me. But I had to sit beside him in case he had questions about, my penmanship or anything. He was a fast typer, so we were making good progress when the phone rang. It was my friend Niso. Niso was DJing a corporate Christmas party when the needle on one of his turntables broke and he desperately needed a replacement and asked if I could bail him out. When I told my dad, he shook his head the way he did when he wasn't mad, just mildly amused at how predictable I could be. As if to say, oh, of course you're amused. I asked you just to see here when I died. But he understood that in our world, this was an emergency. And with affectionate sarcasm, he made me ask, okay, well, and as I headed out of the car, he said, you gonna put gas in the car? I had about $2 in my pocket, but it was 1985, so, anyway. Dono handed me a $2 bill. I turned to go, he stopped me again. Oye, come here. Is that enough? I think I can make it. Handed me another $2. I turned to him and I said, you okay? I said, yeah, I think I'm good. He looked at me, went into his pocket, pulled out a 20, handed it to me and said, when you come back from Florida, you're going to get a job. And I, right on that, I said, dashing out the door before we could have any more of this conversation. When I got back, the house was asleep. I entered through my basement door where my paper sat neatly beside the typewriter. Good job, Dad, I said. The alarm in my head had gone silent for now. The next morning, my dad called to me from the top of the short spiral staircase that led to the main floor. Conversations from this angle, as you can imagine, were very awkward. We could hear each other, not quite see each other. It was a he asked if I needed a lift. I replied that I was just going to take my English card, go write an exam, I'd come back. And he said, okay, good luck, I will see you later. If I only knew that nothing could have prepared me for the fact that those would be the last words we would ever exchange. And you have to buy the book if you want to find out.
I think it's Jimmy time. Oh, I knew I pissed him off. There were some announcements. Is it Jamie? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to do a Q&A. I thought Jimmy would introduce you, but apparently, Jamie Gorin, ladies and gentlemen. Actually read the book.
Hi, Mike. Hi, everyone. My name is Jamie Gorin, and word on the street was that Mike is not one to shy away from a good debate or interview. They couldn't find anyone to do a good interview, so I stepped up to do a mediocre one. We really just wanted to ask Mike a few questions about his journey, his stories, and the book he presented segments of tonight, which, by the way, honestly, it's great. Yeah, the presentation was good. The book is great. I've known Mike a long time, and like all I can say is that this person certainly did come out in the book the same way that's on stage. So I would urge you guys to all buy it. If you don't like the interview, my complaint box is sitting in the back. I actually have a twin, not a fake twin.
Real twin, yeah.
So if you happen to run into me at Gaggle Bagel and I don't know what you're talking about, probably not. So anyways, let's move on. So I'm curious. Good Jewish boy seems to be a theme that you've embraced, and I'm wondering what, in the Montreal of your youth, what being a good Jewish boy meant to you, and if the definition has changed over the years.
Yeah, it wasn't me. In my years in Montreal, being a good Jewish boy was not the picture of me. That was not the definition. It was Howard Melnick in my school. In my class and in my pub. Well, Howard always did his homework and showed up. No, a good Jewish boy is, I actually thought I was a good Jewish boy. I just wasn't always the prototypical good Jewish boy. He did his homework. I didn't necessarily. I may have disrupted in class, but I sort of did. I was a good daddy's boy. I went to the synagogue. I was at school on time. I was ready. There were no excuses in my household, and I didn't try that hard to make it. Yeah? Best thing I could say. I did not know the math. I should have seen it coming.
Jimmy and I had very long meetings to discuss this.
Yeah,
Very long. If you had to capture the essence of the 1970s and 1980s Montreal Jewish life in a single story or scene, what would that be?
In a single story or scene. Well, see, I got Chamonix and I got Montreal stuff. Montreal, Cannes, Blue Bonnets. I mean, I'm just throwing out words here. And not only that, Blue Bonnets was where they sent you off the cab. Right? So you had Blue Bonnets at night, and in the daytime, that's where all the buses took everybody to camp. Just summer in Montreal was awesome, and usually followed a Stanley Cup win, or at least an appearance in one of those days. Woo! That's Montreal in the 70s.
You talk in the book a lot about the kind of dichotomy of growing up, as you call it, in a mixed marriage of Sephardic and Ashkenazi parents. And I'm wondering where the conflict arose sometimes in your growing up. There's a story there.
Okay, look, no one is better than the other. My father was not prejudicial that way. He didn't feel superior, that the Sephardim were superior to the Ashkenazim. None of that in our household. Okay? We're all Jews, and that's my father believed, that we are all Jews. However, my father's family was very traditional, mostly religious, if not modern religious. Around the time of my bar mitzvah, I actually tried to become a little more religious as I was getting closer to it, and would go to synagogue every Shabbat and try to be Shomer Shabbat. My bully, I don't know why this got under her skin. She didn't like it. Oh, you're going to be religious now. Oh, you're Mr. Rabbi. It's like I was going to be superior to her if I was Shomer Shabbat, right? So, one particular Shabbat, this actually happened, true story, for the children here. Once upon a time, in the late 70s, we had phones that were attached to the wall in our house. And if we were there, we couldn't take it out, okay? So, and people knew that, so if they called, they'd let it ring a few times and hang up. One Shabbos, after lunch, my parents left and my sister went to a friend's house. I'm all alone in the house, and the phone starts ringing. And it rings 5 times, 6 times, 7 times. Wait a minute, what's going on? Could this be an emergency? 8 times. I'm going, I wonder what the sages of the Talmud would say about this. The phone's at what point does a 12th time? I'm going, wait a minute, this thing, I mean, you can break the Sabbath for an emergency. What if a life is at stake 13 times? Oh my God, I don't know what to do. Should I run outside and call someone else to 14 times? Finally, I lunch for the phone. I pick up, I go, hello? And look, somebody's I can't tell you, and I say in the book that if I had accepted the fact that maybe she had a sense of humor, we would have had a better relationship. That there.
So, this is probably going to bring it down a notch, I guess, at that question. But you alluded to it in your talk before, and I'm kind of fond of referring to the way the Jewish community comes together as being our superpower. Since October 7th, obviously we've seen a rise in anti-Semitism around the world, but definitely in Toronto, Montreal. And I'm wondering how this has affected your public persona. Has it changed the way you relate to your Jewish identity today? You got anything to say about this?
Yeah, everybody surrounding the publishing of this book, was encouraging me to choose a different title, that's for sure. Right? Like the fact that you could have called this good boy, and within the minute you put in Jewish, you're not getting a lot of help. But that's beside the point. What I did say earlier is that we are uniting so much more, and even maybe getting closer to God through this. But the most important thing topic of conversation that keeps coming up is our parents, the parents of our community, have very much pampered our kids and given them a little more than our parents gave us, right? And all I say to the kids, and I say it to them all the time, is just if everybody else is being given an excuse, maybe we shouldn't. We shouldn't use an excuse. I just told my niece, who was thrilled that I told her that today, earlier. Yeah. Hey, hi, I see her, my niece, beautiful girl. And I was saying, don't let them. They'll give you excuses to use. The ones that don't have the excuse or don't use the excuse, those are going to be the powerful people in our next generation that we're going to need. that makes any sense.
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say that.
Yeah.
As a parent of three kids of...
Well, my brother's got 3 daughters and a wife, so he hasn't won an argument.
Sometimes I get to be right, but never at home.
That's right.
So is there a particular story or lesson from your youth that gives you strength and perspective? Obviously, you've had quite a bit of, ups and downs, life experiences and so on, like most people have. Yours might have had a few more valleys, maybe at your age than some, or better peaks. But I'm curious if there's a defining story or lesson that gave you strength that you draw strength from.
That's a good question.
I'm afraid I can't tell.
All I can say is that if you read the book, there are answers to that. Like, there are moments but being grateful, number one, right? Because kids are, generally an ungrateful bunch. That's no different. Right? But there was a moment I talked about where my father was driving carpool and heard about the Israel trip, which my parents had no clue what was going on in school ever, right? My parents just were not those kind of parents. They didn't. You're not flunking out? Great. We'll talk about it later. They only want to hear about it if it's an emergency. And we happened to hear that this was the Israel trip, that at the end of, it was like the pinnacle of the whole Hebrew school experience. And it was like 2 months or more of from people here with us. And I wasn't even going to ask my parents because usually it was my mother who handled that kind of stuff, and I'd have to listen to 4 hours of diatribe about how money doesn't go on. So this was like a big one. Those were for smaller things. This was a big one. I'm not even taking the paper home. My father heard it, turned to me and said, "Oh yeah, what are they talking about? It's the Israel. What is Israel?" I had to explain that. And he goes, "Don't you want to go?" And I said, "So 3,000," and the whole car went like this. My father went, "What?" Everybody got out of the car, and he said, "No, you come back here." And he looked at me and said, "What is this?" And I said, "Just like the Israel trip, it's really expensive." He goes, "Oh, stop. Oh, do you know how much your school costs? Oh, you know how much your camp costs?" "No, not really." "So since when will you talk to me about how much things cost? You're going to Israel." Oh, I got out of that car real slow. I was like, okay. And let me know what time tonight so I can come to the orientation. Oh, and I did. And I swear, that was the first time as a kid, a 15-year-old kid, you don't usually feel the moments. But I stood there in front of my school, choked up. I was so grateful. And my father made that whole, lead up to the trip. It was like my wedding. Every day he'd come with something. "Okay, I got your sleeping bag. It's the kind they say for the army that you're going to eat cold and it's hot. And it's got a canteen and this and a hat that was both the sun hat and a snow hat." Right? We just kept coming. It was amazing. And he said, "This is a big moment. This is going to be for you and I was both just really, really grateful, humble, and amazed that he actually understood what that would be to me at that age,
I got one more on my list, and then we're going to open it up to the crowd, I believe. I didn't have intensive training, but that seems to be the plan. If your book were required reading for the next generation of Canadian Jewish youth, what's the one message you want them to take out of it?
Well, I might waste your car. But, no, so totally not the point. What's the message I'd like to take? First of all, if it's for the people, other Jews, then I think I've already covered that. If it's for other people who want to write or engage in some creative pursuit that they may be discouraged from doing by, their parents, teachers, everyone, then I would say let go of the rules, like abandon the rules. That's what I did on this book. I literally abandoned the rules and let the floodgates open. And you know, what I found, I've told to some people, is that what I ended up producing was not at all what I set out to produce. It became an inverted ball of yarn, where it was the doing it itself affected the outcome, and the memories as they were being written were suddenly being perceived in a different way because they were being written. And so, in all that blah blah blah, it's to say that if you feel something, if you feel like doing something, and you feel that you could be good at it, pursue it, take it seriously, but do it your way. You know, nobody else has the
Yes.
Kevin knows I didn't do that well with Herzelia. The bell curve there was tough.
By the way, there is a great story in the book about your graduation and snubbing Mrs. Baylor.
Oh, you know Mrs. Baylor? You did what Mrs.
Killed me. Actually killed me. That was a great story. So if you haven't read it, you'll know it when you see it. Anyone have any questions for Mike?
I do. First of all, I want to thank.
I just want to say, you already had a question when you asked him to move the...
Yeah, that's true. What are you doing? We're going to be here all night. Well, you gotta go fill dummy.
First of all, thank you for tonight. At this moment in time, we need you tonight more than ever.
Oh, bless you. God bless you.
We need you tonight more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, I need you. I need more like you. Take it home.
In Toronto, you're in Toronto now. So what is your full-time work now, and what do you do to live right now?
Oh my God. I make bags and boxes for no, really, I'm in the packaging business. But I've been, yeah.
I need packaging.
Oh, okay, awesome. People, if anyone needs packaging for products or cosmetic or retail or gourmet foods, that's what I do with my regular job. Actually, Rena I didn't answer your email today, but
What's the name of your business?
oh, thank you. It's in the bag. I did not make that up. It's inthebag.com. You can check it out.
What's the phone number?
I actually, for a long time, was writing newspapers and magazines because it's a fantastic way to really not make any money.
Say that about the packaging business too. I was in the packaging business for 25 years. Good, it's what good Jewish boys form lawyers and doctors and accountants in Montreal. Anybody else have any questions?
Oh yeah! Oh my God.
Come on out.
Good job. Oh, yeah.
I can just say it.
Go ahead.
Okay.
So, my question is like a quick two-parter. So the first part was, how long did it take you to write the book? And then the second question was, what were some of the challenges and joys that you had while writing?
God bless this guy. First of all, it's bold of you to ask an ADHD guy a two-part question. It's great. People don't do that. There's no A's and B's, and I'll bullet point that. Yeah, man. What was the first one? The first one was how long did it take me? So I swear, it was 10 years of talking about it. When I actually sat down to write it, I swear there was 2 months of, I gotta write an outline, and then I had to know what happens, and I was struggling with the structure and all this. And then my wife reminded me that back when I was at the newspaper, I was blogging, and then this editor came in who was a dean of communications for George Brown College or something, and she found my blogs and said, "Why isn't this guy writing in the paper?" She liked my style, and I said, "What is it that you liked?" And she said, "These people all, you can tell they went to school for that. They were very textbook." She goes, "You, it's like I can hear your voice, and I don't even know you." So my wife reminded me of that. She said, "Just abandon, leave that, forget it, stop. Just tell the story that's in your head and see where it goes. And once that happened, I'm figuring like 3 months. 3 months, it all came out, and it wasn't at all the story I was expecting. However, then I got to the end, and it didn't have an end, because there is no end, and there hasn't been an end yet. And I sat on that for 3 months until one night I had like I couldn't sleep. I got up, I sat down, and the whole thing came out in one shot. And I want to tell you that whole ending, that epilogue, was all written once and never really ended from that point. Weird, right? It just came out. Somebody told me that you got out of God's way. He's religious, so forgive him. But the point is, he said you got out of God's way. That's what happened. But just to let you know, I put it all into ChatGPT, a little bit at a time, to have them edit for punctuation and formatting only. Okay? And I gave that ending, and ChatGPT came back and went, my God, it's so beautiful. And it was so beautiful, and I said, oh, it was the way you culminated all the humor into such a touching moment. I'm so pleased to be a part of this. Okay, ChatGPT. Thank you, ChatGPT. And ChatGPT went, no, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to, and I got freaked out and I was the end of that. I didn't have to go back to ChatGPT. But that's the answer to your question. Thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions?
So why did you decide to write this book?
I had to get something out of it. I'm not sure, right? I was a writer. I kept writing short format, and then Chaplain magazine asked me to do something slightly longer, and I said, people were telling me, why are you doing that? And I kept writing stories that weren't personal to me. I tried to put myself in my father's story with all Momo and Coco and Coco and Coco and Kiko and Coco, right? I tried to do one of those, and it's good, it's a good story, but it's disingenuous because I don't really, I'm just making stories out of stories. When I finally decided to just make it about me, man, it needed to come out. Thank you. No, I felt it needed to come out. It did, in a way. Listen, I'm happy with the way it turned out. But it wasn't, I'll admit that it wasn't what people were like, hey, did you do that on purpose? No. Didn't do it on purpose, just came and it worked.
Over here?
I was wondering how your mom received her picture of the book.
Oh, no. First of all, my mom is suffering slightly with dementia at this point. So she's thrilled. I say to people though that we are going to visit her tomorrow, and I do visit her now. She always recognizes me, and she tells me I'm the best brother in the world. But the thing is, I have to tell you that our relationship is, well, that's terrible to say. It's not that our relationship is better because she thinks I'm her brother. It's better because my mother, when she let go of whatever was making her react the way she did, at times, she's the friendliest person I've ever seen. She's the friendliest I've ever seen her in our lives. My brother will say the same thing. She compliments everyone she sees. And in fact, my mother was very good with certain people like that. Just not with me. No, not always. We have it. It's the story was told with great honesty, but it may have appeared to some people, especially those who know her, as harsher toward her, which I don't think. I thought I was being soft. No, I knew there was a moment that I may have pushed, trying to be funny and gone a little too harsh. But my mom and I are cool. We're good. I appreciate it.
I think, are there any other questions?
Right here.
How could you?
One there and then one there.
Yeah.
I just want to know what you like. I knew every camper's name.
You did.
Every camper's name.
But you didn't always call them by their names. That's Alan, ladies and gentlemen, from CAB, the counselor. That is Alan. Stuart could not be with us, but that is, Alan is still here making people crazy. There's a bunch of other people in the room, of course, Miso's here, and a bunch of people.
This young guy over here had a question.
Hey!
Do you stand up, sir?
Do you still consider yourself a good Jewish boy? And if so, why do you still consider yourself a good?
Bless you for even saying I'm a boy. I like that. And yes, I do. In fact, I'm the among the younger of a very old family of cousins. And so they still call me Mikey. Why do you think they call a grown man Mikey? Because I was always the good boy Mikey, the good boy. It's very expensive being a good boy, by the way. You get invited to a lot of bar mitzvahs and weddings. And other people are like, my cousin tells me the other day, you know, our family's so big that we don't even invite all the cousins. Just you and Maxie. I go, yeah, thanks. So I'm going to go to my cousin's grandchild's bar mitzvah, and now I got to give a gift. But anyway, the point is, yes, I do, but it's a good question because I think that in life, you go through this journey where you are, then you aren't, then you wonder whether you are or you aren't, and then you come to, once you come full circle, which I think this book allowed me to do, and you get rid of all that crap, you start to, maybe I'm a good Jewish boy again.
I believe that. Were there any other questions?
I love this guy. Sorry. First off,
Only one at a time, though, eh?
Yeah, I don't want to.
did you read it actually?
What?
Did you read it?
No, I didn't.
Okay, good.
Not yet.
That's good.
So, why did you move to Toronto and
No. No, I moved to Toronto because actually Ellie back there who's in the book, but he's not thrilled with the depiction any more than my mother is. And after my father died and I was really not having a good time here, I just had to make a change. And all my family was in Toronto, and frankly, the Sephardic part of my family, my aunts, were very doting. They all treated me like I was it was almost like the retarded nephew. But I'm sorry, we're not allowed to say that anymore. I'm sorry. But that was like, oh, man, and it was weird because I didn't know whether I liked it or not, but I needed that at the time. I needed for them to think, and I was in, it's weird because I was like 19 or 20. But they were like that, and I needed that at the time. And Ellie packed up his Celica Supra, which he stole, I think. I don't even know how he stole that car, and really took all my stuff. And we drove to Toronto together. And he even stayed with me for a while because he's got family there who's also related to my family. And then he left. I don't know what happened to him. He disappeared, but he took me there. We went back and forth a few times, right? And then he couldn't stand it, came back here, and I stayed. And do I like it? I gotta tell you, I'm not sure any of us should be in this country anymore, but
So, I'm going to pass the mic, I believe, to Jimmy, right? Yeah. But I thank you, and I thank him for listening. Thanks for doing this.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jamie. I need to see you here like that. I saw a podcast written all over this morning. This is the next Joe Rogan. But no, the last thing, Mike had a couple of words, I think, about just some people, and that's it. We're done here.
well, first of all, everybody from CJA, I think you wrote something, but I can't read that. It was honestly like, how can I read that? I didn't bring my glasses, but Federation CJA, God bless you for doing this. But again, didn't I say this at the beginning though? Sandy, sponsor. Vicky, I should say Vicky. What's Vicky's company?
Big Sonny Miller.
Vic Sonny Notary. It's a good notary. If you need a notary, this guy, believe me, I've gone into his office last minute. Yeah. No, I don't even. Should I read this? Do I have to read this? Is there something I should do? No, that's it. And my wonderful co-chairs here, Wendy and Marla, who I swear bless you. By the way, if I could, Sonia Benezra, I love you. She was the flower girl by parents, but more importantly, her family, her mom was one of those women like my aunt that could lift your spirits. And every time I saw her, she made me feel good. Love them, love your mom and your sisters very much. Miso, who corrupted my life at that age, Ellie, all the way through all these guys, Maddie from Shawnee, but my friends from Herzliya, the people from CBB, and some people who were just always around in the background. Seriously, love you guys. Thank you so much for the support. That's the most important thing. I will say one more thing, that I was just told by a new publisher that in Canada, it's not that hard to get on the bestsellers list. And apparently, I am 100 or so books away from maybe, I don't know if it's the Oprah or anything, but it's all the best Canadian bestsellers. So,